I wanted to open a bar underground, but the cops told me I can't sell beer to minors. Minors. Not like minors, but like minors. Brothers, sisters, comrades and friends, welcome to Bat Country. Delirium Tremens is, it turns out, pretty rare. I didn't know that when I first started talking about my experiences with it, and it makes me feel kind of special. Very few people go through delirium tremens. Even hardened alcoholics rarely experience it, but those who do often die of it. Looking back on my own drinking over the years, and given everything that I've learned in the process of producing Bat Country, I'm a little surprised that I got it as bad as I did. The first time I went through it, I was 35 or 36, so relatively young. And at that time, I was relatively fit. I was in quite good health despite all of the alcohol. And while I was a candidate for alcoholism from day one, from the first drink at aged 14, I was always on a path towards an alcohol use disorder. My drinking was only extremely extreme for about the last 3 years or so. I had been drinking extremely hard for a period of roughly 3 years when I first experienced delirium tremens. And today in sobriety, I've met truly low-bottom alcoholics. That used to be the term. People who have been drinking half gallons of vodka for 20 or 30 years, and when they got sober, even they didn't experience delirium tremens. The science about this stuff is pretty thin on the ground. Much is known about the mechanisms of delirium tremens, but it seems very hard to predict who it will strike and who it will pass over. Since it tends to strike largely at random, or at least without pattern, it's useful to know what the early stages of delirium tremens feel like, so that you might gird yourself from a very, very terrible experience by listening to my own experience. I can give you some tips of what to look for that might indicate you're about to enter the most horrible phase of your life, which is delirium tremens. And my goal with this information is that if you recognize some of the lesser discussed symptoms that I'm about to discuss, it might encourage you to go and seek help sooner rather than later. When it comes to conditions like delirium tremens, in a lot of cases it's profoundly true that the best treatment is prevention. While it's true that only a small percentage of even serious alcoholics will experience delirium tremens, it is even more true that sober people won't experience it at all. The implication there, put down the bottom. Dr. Bat Country prescribes 0 alcohol. Now, as always, if you have follow-up questions for the information I'm about to share with you, please leave it in the comments. I'll try to be as candid as possible, and I'll reply as quickly as possible too. Anyway, let's get into it. What are early stages of delirium tremens like? What are the signs and signifiers to look out for? What does it feel like? I'm going to share my experience with you right now. Let's go. Delirium tremens is the most extreme manifestation of the condition alcohol withdrawal syndrome, and it's also the most dangerous. Delirium tremens is literally a medical emergency, but there are a few kind of interconnected conditions at this level of withdrawal. There's alcoholic psychosis, alcoholic hallucinosis, delirium tremens, and more. And they all have overlapping symptoms, and they all share characteristics. Whichever way you cut it, it's a very advanced stage of the withdrawal process. And I'm not a fancy big city scientist, but you can kind of consider this stage of withdrawal like this. Alcohol is a psychoactive substance and a depressant. When you've been drinking very heavily for an extended period of time, your central nervous system will compensate for the depressant effects of the alcohol. That is to say, your body will be working much harder than normal to keep your brain awake and functioning. A depressant like alcohol and its related chemicals, it wants you to lose consciousness. Your central nervous system wants you to be operating, it wants you to be awake and functioning. And there's a clash there. If you suddenly remove the alcohol, after those adaptations have been made, after your central nervous system has become adapted to operating with high levels of a depressant substance, your central nervous system is still working hard to motivate your brain, to keep it alive, to keep it working. Suddenly, without the alcohol, without the depressant effects of the alcohol, your brain no longer has any restrictions on it. So your brain starts just exploding with hyper-excitability. Here's an analogy that I find useful. Modern car engines are built with artificial limiters to control how fast the engine is turning over. One of the flaws of a combustion engine is that it can be, under the right circumstances, subject to a catastrophic chain reaction. It's called runaway. The engine will run away, which is like an exponential acceleration due to a fault. And car manufacturers build in these artificial limiters to stop the engine turning over too quickly, running away with itself, and ultimately destroying itself. That's partially why your neighbour's flashy BMW would probably be able to do 200 miles per hour on a long enough road, but you'll never get it faster than 155 due to the artificial limits placed on the engine. And that's what's happening with your brain. In this analogy, the artificial limiter is the alcohol, a depressant. In alcohol withdrawal, the alcohol is working like that limiter. So your central nervous system has its foot flat on the floor. Your brain is buzzing with excitement and energy, but that energy is being suppressed by the alcohol. Remove the alcohol, and you have an exponential runaway. And that's delirium tremens. Absolutely catastrophic, out of control brain activity. Does that make sense? I feel like that analogy is messy, or I could have done it better, but I don't have time and it's very hot in here. And when that happens, when the brain's activity just runs away with itself, it leads to some very strange and confusing symptoms. But that idea of a chain reaction and of an out-of-control, exponentially accelerating engine does a relatively good job of explaining some of the symptoms you'll experience in the early stages of delirium tremens. For example, the uncontrolled visualizations that you'll see when you close your eyes. But we'll come back to those symptoms, the more interesting ones, in a moment. Before we do, let's just take a quick look at the kind of normal physiological reactions you'll be experiencing first. Just pretend all of this was like this from the start. Just imagine this background. I'm very hot in here and I don't have time to refilm. Like I said, not everybody is going to experience delirium tremens. It's a small percentage, even of alcoholics. And some of the milder symptoms, which we'll talk about next, are common across a number of manifestations of alcohol withdrawal syndrome. They're not specific to delirium tremens, but it is useful to know what they are, because if you spot more than one of these symptoms in yourself, then I would suggest you go and seek medical help immediately. You want to stop delirium tremens before it happens. So you'll have a racing heart. And when I say a racing heart, I mean you will feel like you're about to die of heart failure or a coronary embolism of some kind. Your heart will be racing, and not only that, it will be palpitating. And if you're anything like me, my experience was that I was hyper-focused. I was obsessing over my own heart rate. I was walking to a mirror in my bathroom and checking my pulse regularly. And every time there was a palpitation, I was convinced that my heart had stopped. Restlessness. You will climb into bed, you'll roll over, you'll toss, you'll turn, you'll get up, you'll decide that you need to go outside, you'll put on your jacket and your shoes, then you'll change your mind, take them off, get back into bed, rinse and repeat for hours. You feel like a shark, you know, how if a shark stops swimming it will die. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's how you feel. You feel like you must be constantly moving. You're kind of manic. Sweating. Now, I am a sweaty person at the best of times, even now on this lovely Friday evening in the cool British countryside, I'm sweating. But in withdrawal, as you approach delirium tremens, the sweating becomes torrential. I would have to wrap wet, cool towels around my neck, and my bed would be soaking wet. And it felt as if every chemical, every toxic chemical in my body was suddenly leaking out of my pores. And I was very aware that I stank. Now, the sweating is a very minor symptom to begin with, but it does have an impact. Delirium tremens thrives on dehydration and electrolyte imbalances. So the very least you can do to help yourself is try to keep yourself hydrated. Tremors. So in withdrawal, even very mild withdrawal and hangover, your hands will tend to tremble slightly. It's probably the best known characteristic of withdrawal. In fact, many people, when they hear delirium tremens, interpret it to be delirium tremors, and it is not. The tremors that you have as you approach and transition into delirium tremens are quite different, almost debilitating. Your whole body will flinch and twitch and jerk, and you will be unsteady on your feet to the point that you will avoid standing up, you'll avoid getting out of the bed, and when you do, you'll weave erratically. I found going downstairs to be the most difficult part. Every time I lifted one foot off to move it to a lower step, my whole leg would tremble. And the last time I experienced this, I lived with a big spiral staircase on the 3rd floor, and it was an ordeal to leave that apartment and get out. Interestingly, one of the diagnostic tests for severe liver diseases involves what's called a flapping tremor. It's called asterixis, and I don't mean to conflate various different conditions, but it is interesting to me that one of the signifiers of severe liver diseases is in fact an uncontrolled tremor. Blood pressure. Your blood pressure will be sky high to the point that you will feel weak, and every time somebody mentions it, it will make it worse. Your blood pressure becomes a preoccupation, something to worry about, something to feel anxious about. Seizures. Delirium tremens very often comes with seizures. I'm incredibly lucky that I have never had one, despite experiencing delirium tremens 5 times, full-blown delirium tremens 5 times. For some reason, I've never had a seizure. But I know plenty of people who have, and they say that that alone is traumatic enough to change their lives. It's often a lot of people who experience seizures regard that moment as their rock bottom. The point of this is that you get treatment before that happens. Insomnia and fatigue. You will feel constantly like you need to go to sleep, but it is not possible for you. And any time that you get close to falling asleep, you will be subjected to terrifying and uncontrollable visualizations. That's a big indicator that delirium tremens is around the corner. So that's a quick checklist of some of the common physiological symptoms that are synonymous with delirium tremens, and also shared with various other alcohol withdrawal syndrome maladies like alcoholic hallucinosis and alcoholic psychosis. And the point of mentioning those things is that if you are experiencing them now, after stopping drinking suddenly, now is the time to go and get help. Because what follows is far worse. But let's talk about it. Okay, so these are some things that you will experience before delirium tremens and as delirium tremens begins to initiate and in the early stages of it. At this point, if you're experiencing these, there's still time to do something about it. But it is getting close to being too late. First up is the anxiety. Oh man, the anxiety. There is anxiety, and then there is withdrawal anxiety, and then there is delirium tremens anxiety. I had a generalized anxiety disorder even before my first experience with alcohol withdrawal of this kind. So I have first-hand experience. I know what baseline anxiety feels like. I know what an anxiety disorder feels like. And I also know what anxiety as a result of delirium tremens feels like. And it is a whole different thing. Nothing compares to the brutality of severe alcohol withdrawal anxiety. It's hard to even talk about it. It's exhausting to even recall. And none of your conventional tricks that you do for yourself during self-care to handle your own anxiety, none of that works for this. Whether you would normally climb into bed and hide under the covers with your favourite TV show that you've seen 1,000 times, none of that works. It might take the edge off, briefly, but then the anxiety will return with new energy and new ferocity. You have this kind of constant feeling that people are expecting things from you, that you're letting people down somehow, and the constant feeling that you haven't done your homework multiplied by 1,000,000, like you're late for something and everybody knows, and somewhere everybody is talking about it, and somehow you can sense it. But you can't do anything about it. You're kind of stuck in time. I remember having that feeling that I was letting people down while I was stood just in my underwear in my apartment in the middle of the empty space, just stuck in time, absorbing that feeling. Like the weight of the world crushing down on me personally. In delirium tremens, eventually that anxiety will evolve into outright paranoia, real paranoia. And that paranoia and the delusions that support it will drive you to do very weird things. I think the weirdest thing that I did as a result of delirium tremens anxiety that then evolved into a full-blown paranoid delusion was I went to a local police station in Berlin and reported my girlfriend as being kidnapped while she was away with family. And I gave a full, lucid, hour-long interview to the police in that state, in that delusion, convinced that my girlfriend had been kidnapped and was being used to extort money from me somehow. I sat in front of the German police for over an hour trying to convince them that my delusion was real. And it was not a spur-of-the-moment thing. It takes an hour to walk to that police station from my apartment. And the weirdest part, I think, of it is that when we were done at the police station, I left. They had humoured me. I didn't realise they were doing it. And I left feeling like I had done the right thing. Anyway, don't let it get that far. Because before that, in this stage of anxiety, you will have a profound preoccupation with your own death and an unshakable conviction that you are dying. You are about to die. Death is imminent. This is a conviction. You are certain. This is it. You're dying right now. Goodbye. If you are experiencing anxiety that is far noticeably above and beyond anything you've ever experienced, there's a good chance that you're about to experience delirium tremens, and now is a good time to get your ass to a hospital. Okay, next, light sensitivity. I see this come up occasionally if you Google symptoms of delirium tremens. This one is added as a sub point, like a lower priority symptom. But for me, I think this is a really revealing one, which is why I include it with some prominence here. Before the more dramatic characteristics of delirium tremens begin to present themselves, that is, the hallucinations, the most famous component of delirium tremens, I experienced a period of really extreme light sensitivity. If you experience it like I did, you will want to turn off all of the lights and sit in a dim room as much as possible, even better if it's dark, due to the discomfort of the lights. You'll turn off all the lights, and if you're outside, you will stare down at the floor and squint, because the light is painful. For me, the light sensitivity is a sure sign that what you're experiencing is more than a hangover and maybe more than conventional alcohol withdrawal syndrome. The light sensitivity for me was comorbid with delirium tremens. And the real sticking point here is that if you don't seek help at this point, you're going to be in trouble. Because it was my experience that the dark made the hallucinations worse when they came. And I found myself, the first time I did delirium tremens untreated, I did get treatment eventually, but at this stage I hadn't been treated, didn't know what it was even. I was sat making a decision about whether I wanted the pain of the light in order to mute the intensity of the hallucinations, or would I prefer to let the hallucinations exist in the dark because the light was too painful. And in the end, I chose to keep the lights on and suffer the pain of the light sensitivity in order to keep the hallucinations at bay. And that is a terrifying choice to have to make. So remember that one. If you take nothing else from this video, remember the light sensitivity, because it comes on fast. And for me, it's a very good indicator that some very terrible hallucinations are about to happen, and you might be about to lose your grip on reality. Next, hot and cold flushes, or prickles. Now again, these are relatively common across withdrawal, but I include them because, for me, looking back, I'm not sure whether they were real hot and cold flushes or perhaps actually tactile hallucinations. Look out for them. If you're feeling tingles up one side of your body or across your calves or just down like the fronts of your arms and not the back, or if you're feeling like specific hot and cold sensations, I have a feeling that those were not flushes. They were part of the hallucination. And if you can figure that out early, you'll be in a good position to prevent the worst of the hallucinations by seeking treatment at that point. Next, random pangs of intense fear. If you're having uncontrollable flashes, moments of abject panic and fear, then that could be signaling the onset or the progression of your condition towards delirium tremens. And unfortunately, things may be about to get much worse. It's these pangs of fear, they're not the same as the anxiety and the fear that comes with normal withdrawal. These are moments of fleeting, abject terror, and they occur in the first couple of hours of the beginning of delirium tremens. The sudden pangs of fear, completely unsolicited and untriggered by anything external, that's a good symbol that delirium tremens is close. And I remember mine vividly. I remember that in my most recent relapse, I had already gone to a detox clinic in Germany with my girlfriend who was sat waiting with me, waiting to be admitted. And I remember being overwhelmed with terror out of nowhere. I knew I was already going into delirium tremens, and it struck in the moment before I was admitted to the ward. And I remember grabbing hold of her shoulder with both hands and digging my forehead between her shoulder blades, sweating and dizzy, just wanting the fear to stop. And it was an indistinct fear. There was no particular cause. I was beginning to have visual hallucinations at that point, but the fear was independent of them. And for me, they preceded the hallucinations by an hour or two. So if you're feeling that, just random shrieks of terror throughout your whole body, that's a warning sign. Next, of course, are the visualizations themselves. If you're getting these, then it means that you are already, at best, in alcoholic hallucinosis. But at worst, you're headed towards a break from reality and delirium tremens. Delusions and cardiac arrhythmias and uncoordinated movement, sudden problems with coordination, all of these come together very, very quickly. And if you're having visualizations, you need to do something about it immediately. So what I'm talking about, in my experience, these very early visualizations, the earliest ones of the delirium tremens, tend to be relatively benign. I tend to see human faces is the big one, which I've talked about at length, so I won't go into that. But the other is I see architecture, like non-existent architecture or impossible architecture. And my visualization will sometimes pan across it and then begin again all the way across it, whatever it is. Like, I remember actually the most recent one was the underside of a giant sandstone bridge, a giant, incomprehensibly huge viaduct, I suppose. And my visualization panned across it, and then panned across it, and then panned across it over and over again. And I was able to have absolutely no control over it. I was just forced to see this architecture over and over again. There is a chance that will be the worst of it for you. You will have closed eye hallucinations. That's what these visualizations are. And there's a chance that it won't get worse. But there is also a chance it will get a lot fucking worse. So if you're closing your eyes and seeing things, go and get help. Whatever that help looks like, go and get it. Because the risk is that as soon as it gets worse than that, you will no longer be able to tell that it's a hallucination. And at that point, you have broken from reality, and you will not be able to help yourself any longer. Okay, related to that, so now we're kind of already in delirium tremens. I wanted this to be like how to stop delirium tremens before it starts, but it's just turned out not to be possible. So these are symptoms of the early stages, and the next one, or kind of simultaneous one, is auditory and tactile hallucinations. The vast majority of people who I have talked to, or who talk about delirium tremens, will report that their severe hallucinations begin with whispering. And that is profoundly true of my own experience. They began with the sounds of whispering, or with the sound of very quiet, unidentifiable music, like the music I am currently playing in the background. If you've ever wondered why I play this kind of lo-fi, slightly indiscernible music where you can't quite pick out the lyrics, it's because I hear this in delirium tremens. So if you're hearing tiny, small music and you can't identify where it's coming from, that could be, or almost certainly is, the beginning of a larger and more comprehensive set of hallucinations. If you're hearing whispering but you can't identify it, you have to act fast, because my experience was that very soon after that I stopped realizing that I was hallucinating. I was no longer aware that I was delusional. If you let this go on without doing anything about it, it will be too late for you to recognize that it's not real. Everything up until this point, you might still recognize that things aren't quite right. Beyond this point, it's too late. This is the threshold. This is the last moment. The closed-eye hallucinations and the auditory and tactile hallucinations. These are it's the last chance that you will have to take action. Because beyond this, things spiral out of control incredibly fast. And I think I'll stop there, because everything that comes after this, it's already too late. You're already too deeply in delirium tremens to recognize it. If you act before any of these things happen, your outcomes will be better. But after these things, the hallucinations and the detailed, convincing delusions, the complete break from reality, the raw, terrifying insanity, it's going to make it impossible for you to get the help you need alone. So my advice to you is that if you suspect you are experiencing any of these, treat them as though you are experiencing them, and use that as motivation to go get help. Preferably from some medical professionals, not from YouTubers like me. Because listen, when these things do come on, they will come on so fast and so unpredictably that the only way to handle them is with aggressive action and an abundance of caution. It's the only worthwhile approach, because the alternative is that one moment you're sat in your apartment, your house, and you're feeling really bad. You're just feeling bad because of withdrawal. And then from somewhere in the house, you'll start hearing distant music, or you'll start hearing some whispering. And then before you know it, you wake up restrained to a hospital bed in a psych ward, with no idea of how you got there, because you were naked in a gas station at 4 o'clock in the morning, or you were on the roof of a building trying to set fire to yourself. No explanation of what led you there. For a lot of people, they don't make it out of delirium tremens. So treat every symptom as serious. And the best case scenario is that you feel a little bit silly for going to the hospital. That's the best case. And the worst case is you die alone in paralyzing terror. Good luck out there.